This week on Jerusalem Dateline, a special look at Iran. Iran retaliates against the United States for killing General Qasem Soleimani. What's next for the Middle East? And did Iran shoot down a Ukrainian airliner? Plus, Soleimani's legacy, thousands of armed Shiite militiamen across the Middle East. And some good news, hope for Iranians. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. From Tehran to Washington and around the world, nations are still dealing with the aftershock of one of the most potentially explosive events in recent history, the killing of Iran's number 2 leader, Qasem Soleimani, with many asking what comes next. CBN senior international correspondent Gary Lane brings us this report.
Western officials now say it's highly likely that Iran was responsible for shooting down a Ukrainian passenger airliner late Tuesday, killing all 176 people on board. The crash occurred just hours after Iran launched a barrage of missiles against U.S. air bases in Iraq. This video shows the moment the Boeing 737 was struck by a missile. An Iranian resident recorded video of the moment the plane crashed to the ground outside Tehran. Iranian media is broadcasting CCTV video that shows debris on fire streaking past the camera.
The evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile.
Western intelligence officials say it's likely the Iranians fired off the anti-aircraft missile because they mistook the Ukrainian passenger plane for a possible U.S. fighter jet. Iran has invited officials from Boeing, the U.S. and Canada to investigate, but the U.S. may not want Americans to go to Iran with tensions so high. Just hours after the crash, Iran had cleared all evidence of the accident from the crash zone. The black boxes have been recovered, but it remains unclear if Iran will turn them over to Western investigators. Meanwhile, back in Washington, the House passed the War Powers Resolution, which says the president must inform Congress before taking further military action against Iran. Only 3 Republicans voted for the measure, 8 Democrats against. The resolution is not law, it's non-binding, simply a sense of the House resolution that requires no presidential signature. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the measure has real teeth. She says Trump endangered the lives of American diplomats and service members when he ordered the strike that killed Iranian Quds Force General Qasem Soleimani.
The president to say, I inform you by reading my tweets. No, that's not the relationship that our founders had in mind.
Pelosi and other Democrat leaders are upset because the president did not inform them prior to taking action against Iran. At a rally in Toledo Thursday night, the president said he had good reason not to tell them about it.
You know, these are split-second decisions. You have to make a decision. We didn't have time to call up Nancy, who is not operating with a full deck.
The resolution passed after Trump said Soleimani was planning to blow up our embassy in Iraq. Gary Lane, CBN News.
With accusations flying, supporters of the strike that killed Soleimani say it's important to remember the current round of trouble began when an Iranian-backed militia attack on a U.S. facility in Iraq that killed an American contractor. Here's a look at how the major events have continued to unfold. After days of mass ceremonies, mourners prepared for the burial of Qasem Soleimani. The crowds were so large at one ceremony that at least 40 died in a stampede. And then came the Iranian response. Iran called the missile attack Operation Martyr Soleimani and fired the surface-to-surface missiles at 2 U.S. military bases, one near Erbil in Kurdish Iraq and the other in Iraq's Anbar province at the Ain Assad Air Base, which President Trump visited in 2018. Iran's supreme leader called it a slap in the face to the U.S., and Iran's foreign minister, Javad Zarif, tweeted, Iran took and concluded proportionate measures in self-defense. And he added, we do not seek escalation of war, but will defend ourselves against any aggression. After the attacks, President Trump tweeted, all is well. Missiles launched from Iran at 2 military bases located in Iraq. Assessment of casualties and damages taking place now. So far, so good. And on Tuesday, he said it wouldn't be good for the U.S. to leave Iraq.
Well, I think it's the worst thing that can happen to Iraq. If we leave, that would mean that Iran would have a much bigger foothold, and the people of Iraq do not want to see Iran running the country. That I can tell you. So we'll see how it all works out.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo defended the decision to kill Soleimani.
We could clearly see we're continuing efforts on behalf of this terrorist to build out a network of campaign activities that were going to lead potentially to the death of many more Americans. It's the right decision. We got it right.
Even after Iran's retaliations by its military, there's still concern about Iran's proxies.
It's been Iran, through its proxies, and it has consistently escalated this in terms of the size, scale, scope of their attacks.
And those proxies in the region are extensive. They include Hezbollah operating in Lebanon and Syria, plus the Houthis in Yemen. In addition, Iran has a number of Shiite militias like Hashd al-Shaabi inside Iraq. We've also learned that the Mahdi army has been reactivated by the infamous Shiite Iraqi cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Philip Smythe of the Washington Institute has spent years studying the Iranian-backed militia groups and developing what he calls the Shia Militia Mapping Project that identifies those Shiite militias throughout the Middle East. Smythe sat down with CBN's John Jessup in a Washington studio to explain his important message to the U.S. and the West.
We have a multitude of different Shia militias, and because of that, not all of them share the same ideology, but there is a very big pusher for why there are so many Shia militias, and it's Iran. The vast majority of Shia militias that have popped up in the Middle East over the past couple of years have all been guided by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard and by the general ideology in Iran called absolute wilayat al-faqih, where the ultimate religious and political person on the ground who's commanding a lot of these groups is technically the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei.
What about the militias now in the wake of the death of Qasem Soleimani?
He was a guy on the ground who knew how to build relationships, and not just that. What made him very important was how he was able to delegate to other commanders. He knew who the right people were, who was going to be ideologically loyal, who could be financially loyal. In the wake of his assassination, yes, a lot of these militia groups were totally shaken up. Not just because he was killed, there was also another leading commander named Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. This is a man who was on U.S. official terrorism lists. He was a guy who was the official commander of what's called the Hashd al-Shaabi. He was the second in command, at least that was his official title, but he was the real power at the head of Hashd al-Shaabi. Losing a commander like that for Iraqi Shia militias really threw them into shock.
Many wonder if, after the Iranian government's missile attack, these Shia militias might act independently. Is there any concern about that?
There's a lot of concern about that, and there were certain sentiments that were out there that they may try to act on their own. But I mean, the more I look at it, if you look at how they have operated in the past few days, and actually in the past few months, they understand who butters their bread, and that's the Iranians, and they don't want to step out of line. But the other interesting thing is the Iranians have also covered their bases on this too. They had Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who is the Secretary General of Lebanese Hezbollah, come out and say, oh, well, we're going to have autonomous responses depending on what each nation's group wants. That has a very powerful propagandistic message, but also it's aimed for messaging against the West as well. When you look at it, it kind of reaffirms a non-existent sentiment that they have that, oh, these are nationalist groups that are looking out for their own. If Iraqi groups want to retaliate for Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, well, they're within their right to do so. But that's not actually how this works.
How much of a threat do these Shiite militias represent to Israel?
A massive one. This is the tip of the spear for the Iranians in terms of fighting the Israelis.
What can be done to defeat these militia groups?
I hate to be the cynic here, but very little. You would have to really tie back to what are we doing about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps? What are we doing about the ideology? What are we doing in terms of containing Iran? These are, and I say this all the time, they are the spear point for the Iranians. We talk about their nuclear weapon and the nuclear threat that's coming out of Iran, but this is the real nuclear weapon on the ground. This is what affects change in the region. This is what's kept dictators in power that the Iranians have wanted. For instance, Bashar al-Assad. It's the Shia militias that supported him. How do they control Lebanon? Lebanese Hezbollah. How do they cause problems for the Saudis, the Houthis? How do they cause problems for the Israelis? Through other militia proxies. it's not going away. They will wait for a time and place when it works for them for responses. They'll do things over time. It makes sense to them because they operate on their own plane. And if we don't respect that or have any understanding of it, or just think of them as if they're some kind of group that's coming out of a Georgetown textbook, and not respecting kind of the culture that they are coming from or from their line of thinking, then it creates an even bigger problem. You have an ideology that ties them all together, and also, they're viewing this as, well, we're fighting alongside co-religionists for a true cause. I often drop this line. It's a lot like a Hebrew National ad. We answer to a higher power. That's essentially how these guys work. They actually believe they're doing the bidding of Imam al-Mahdi on earth before he returns in kind of their theocratic and theological sense. And Khamenei is leading that charge.
Bottom line, what do Americans need to know about Shiite militias? Why should they care?
Well, they should care because these groups have been consistently threatening the United States and its interests in the region. And ideologically, they hold that the United States needs to not only be out of the region, but religiously speaking, they view the United States as what they call Shaitan al-Akbar, or the greatest Satan. And that's a true belief that many of the hardcore ideologues hold. And this is something that, in Tehran, where you have Khamenei, he truly believes that. The IRGC truly believes that. That means they want to take American lives when they view it as strategically advantageous. So that's something we're going to be dealing with.
Philip Smythe with the Washington Institute, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
The new commander of Iran's elite Quds force, General Ismail Ghani, pledged to continue the path of Qasem Soleimani and, quote, bring about the global rule of the Hidden Imam. Ghani is referring to the Shiites' hidden or 12th Imam. That's a core belief of Shia Muslims. Here's a story that CBN's George Thomas did about the end of the world beliefs of many of Iran's leaders. He did it several years ago during the time of former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. It's still clearly relevant in Iran today.
To trace Ahmadinejad's messianic and end-time beliefs, you have to go to a mosque in the small village of Jamkaran, tucked in a corner of Iran. Behind this mosque, there is a well, and according to Ahmadinejad and millions of Shiite Muslims, out of this well will emerge one day their version of an Islamic savior. They call him the Mahdi, or the 12th Imam. Joel Rosenberg has written a book about it.
It was believed that this Islamic leader was going to come back one day at the end of time and bring justice to the earth.
Tens of thousands of Muslims visit the sacred well each night. The opening of the well is covered by a green-like metal box to prevent people from jumping in. Most of the time here is spent praying and kissing the metal box. Others scribble prayer requests to the Mahdi on pieces of paper that are then dropped into the well. Many, like this young boy with a flashlight, believe the Mahdi is actually hiding at the bottom of the well, reading those prayer requests.
I was looking into the well with my flashlight, hoping to see the Mahdi, but not tonight.
According to Shia scholars, the Mahdi, a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, vanished in the middle of the 9th century.
Shia Muslims expect the 12th Imam to return at the end of history, at the end of days, when there's a time of great genocide, warfare, chaos in the world.
Sunnis, who make up the majority of Muslims in the world, have different views on the Mahdi. For instance, they believe the Mahdi is yet to be born and will descend from Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. Shia Muslims believe the 12th Imam is alive and will reappear before the Day of Judgment. Brother Wahid, a Muslim convert to Christianity, hosts a popular television show seen across the Middle East.
Absolutely. All Muslims are required to believe in the end times. Despite these theological differences between Shia and Sunnis on the Islamic Messiah, belief in the last days is mandatory.
Shias and Sunnis believe the end days will be marked by apocalyptic times.
Just before the Mahdi returns, there will be chaos throughout the world. Wars, famines, and floods will ravage the earth. But when the Mahdi comes, he will bring peace and justice.
Muslims believe that when the Mahdi returns, he will be accompanied by Jesus Christ, also known in Islam as the Prophet Isa.
They believe that Jesus will physically return to this world. He will kill the pigs, break the crosses, kill the Jews, and defeat the Antichrist.
But until that day comes, Ahmadinejad, who sees himself as a kind of John the Baptist figure, is telling the world to prepare.
He believes the end of time is near, that the Islamic Messiah is coming, and the way to accelerate or hasten the 12th Imam's arrival and reign on earth is to destroy Judeo-Christian civilization as we know it.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Christians are among the most persecuted religious minority group in Iran today, especially those who convert from Islam to Christianity. They face even more scrutiny. Now one television channel operating from multiple secret locations is beaming messages of hope directly into the Islamic country. George Thomas has the exclusive details.
Take one.
These are very busy and exciting times at Mohabbat TV as it carries out its mission of broadcasting Christianity into Iran.
We're seeing a huge number of Iranians who are reaching out to our channel.
Mike Ansari oversees the popular channel. Since 2006, they've been beaming Christian programs via satellite to Middle East, Europe, and parts of Asia. But for Mohabbat's cast, crew, production, and office staff, their main focus is the Islamic nation of Iran.
Many of our viewers that are contacting us from Iran, they claim that Islam has not delivered to their expectations. So when they turn the channel on and see Mohabbat TV, they hear a new message of Jesus, of forgiveness, of love, of acceptance.
Nazanin Bahastani manages the phone call center operations for the channel.
Persians are really thirsty for the truth. They want to know that who is this God that we talk about? Who is this Jesus? Is he real or is just a prophet?
To answer those and many other questions, the channel has deployed Farsi-speaking Christian counselors in different time zones around the world. Behastani says they take on average between 8,000 and 10,000 calls a month from Iranians.
That's when, we open the subject, we preach the gospel, and so many give the heart. So many receive him.
But producing Christian programs for Iran is not without its challenges. You see, the bulk of Ansari's productions for the channel are done outside of Iran from multiple secret locations for safety and security reasons.
Our channel and our signals are getting jammed on a daily basis. It is true that the phone calls are being monitored and people who try to contact us may get persecuted from time to time.
In June 2011, a Christian man's house got raided by Iranian authorities as he was on the phone with a Mohabbat counselor. This is an audio recording of the conversation between the phone counselor and a member of the Iranian secret police as he tells the story of what happened when he broke into the house. It has never been released to the public until now, exclusively on CBN News.
فریاد نزن که من مسیحیم بیا دین مذهبی درست کن تو بازار آره شده دردسری برای مردم درست کرده حالا در اینجا دستگیرش کردن والله علی قسم اون خط بز زدن یعنی مرده یعنی خون زیرش راه میکنه به خود به والله علی قسم من دلم برای میسوزه حاضر شماره من کیم آزادش کنم شما خانم شما برای جوانان ایران خیلی دردسر واقعا.
The young Christian man was reportedly killed shortly after the conversation. But Ansari says the threats are not stopping Iranians from watching the channel, which provides 24-hour Christian programming.
Remember, in Iran, there is no such a thing as a church as you and I know outside of Iran. So many Iranians who are curious, they find it easier, more private and more safe to be at home, at their own home, at the comfort of the home, watching the channel.
The official religion of Iran is Islam. Christians are officially less than half of 1% of the population. The overwhelming majority are Muslim. Christians are routinely imprisoned and labeled as threats to national security. Open Doors, a group that has served the persecuted church for decades, has ranked Iran number 9 on its list of 50 countries where persecution of Christians is most severe.
We have programming on a channel that is geared just towards that, to give them hope and encourage them. And yet tell them that, persecution is definitely a part of a Christian's life. When you become a Christian and you reside in a country that is not predominantly Christian, we really don't want to see any of them jeopardized or being persecuted. So we always tell them to act with wisdom and be wise about their new faith and the way they approach others.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
The harsh treatment of Christians is reportedly fueling the flames of church growth.
We're seeing a new season right now. There are so many people who are reaching out on their own accounts. It seems that they're not afraid. They just want to reach out and go beyond any kind of authority or limitation that may exist locally for them, to just connect to somebody that they could relate to.
Ansari, a native of Iran, is encouraging Christians worldwide to pray for Iran.
Our goal is just to be out there and just tell them that there is another choice. The Prophet Jesus, whom they know very well through Islam, he's more than a prophet, that believing in him can bring a sense of hope.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.